What is going on, all you wonderful A-plusers out there? It is I, Stuart, here once again to give you guys another Superman and Lois review, this time talking about episode number 3. And I gotta be totally honest with you guys, this definitely was not my favorite out of the 3 episodes we've gotten so far. It definitely felt like a real step backwards in a lot of ways, but also kind of just felt like nothing was really moving forward at the same time. Now, I do have kind of a theory as to why this might be, and I'll get into that at the very end of the video, but just note that this was not my favorite episode, so I have quite a few things that I'm going to be ranting about in this review that hopefully we can see improve as the show goes on. But for now, there are a few things that did kind of worry me about what might be going on moving forward with this series. But guys, let's go ahead and get right into this. So first of all, luckily I can start this review off on a positive note and talk about one thing I really enjoyed was the very beginning with Superman spending some time with his family as they're continuing to paint their new house, and they're trying to figure out a color that really works for their new house. And I do like how they can't really all agree on the same color, and it eventually just leads to kind of a fun war where they're all like just, you know, painting over each other, and you know, it's just a really cute wholesome scene. And it's followed by a pretty cool looking action scene where one of the, like, there's a bridge in China that's about to collapse, and Superman arrives in the nick of time to save it. Now, we saw part of this in the trailers, and to me, the shots that we got in the trailers looked absolutely amazing, and it really got me hyped for when the scene was eventually going to play out in the show. Unfortunately, the full scene doesn't quite look as good as it does in these exterior shots. As you can see, some of the close-up shots look really well, not bad, but definitely not great. You can tell this is definitely a TV budget when you get some of these closer shots, unfortunately, but which is just, you know, really funny because when you compare it to some of the more wide shots you get of this bridge, it almost feels like you're watching 2 completely different TV shows. We cut to the main thing that I wasn't a big fan of with this episode, and that is most of the high school aspects when it comes to Jordan and Jonathan Kent. Now, I definitely see where they're going with developing his character, and there are a lot of things about it that I do enjoy. One of the things I'm not a big fan of, however, is the real 2-dimensional bullies that we've been getting since episode 1. Sean and his friends, who we don't even really know the names of, at least not to my knowledge, are really just, they haven't really had much personality since the beginning, and I kind of figured here would be the perfect episode where you could actually kind of flesh them out, especially because now you actually have scenes between them and Jordan Kent. But rather than really doing anything with that, it continues to just be kind of they just end up being just the same cliche high school bullies, and it really feels out of place compared to everything else that we've been getting in the show. So it does kind of suck that the high school aspects of this show have just been kind of a big disappointment so far. And again, it didn't really bother me in the first 2 episodes because the high school aspects weren't really the focus of the show, but now they are. Now we're getting a lot more scenes in the high school, so I'm really hoping that the writing for these scenes improve over time, but I guess that's something we're gonna have to wait and see to find out. We get a scene also immediately afterwards where Clark has been using his supersonic hearing to listen in on Jordan and Jonathan Kent to make sure everything with high school is going okay, which of course does not sit well with the 2 of them. Neither of them are happy, and I think what really annoys me about Clark during this scene is that he kind of has this I did nothing wrong attitude about it immediately afterwards. It's not until Lois kind of points out to him how bad that is, where he does eventually, you know, apologize to both Jordan and Jonathan Kent and promises not to do that again. But the fact that he did in the first place, and the fact that it took Lois to tell him to apologize to the 2 of them, I don't know, just to me that really felt out of character for him. But I don't know, maybe no one else feels that way, but at least to me it definitely felt out of character for Superman. We then get some really cool scenes where Lois is trying to convince her new boss that Morgan Edge is someone that they should look into. As much as I did like this, I do like that her new boss, despite her being much, like, I don't know how to put it without being mean. She's definitely not as much of a professional journalism as Lois Lane is, but I also don't think that's the right word to use, because she is clearly a professional. She, runs her own company, but at the same time, she's definitely not as good as Lois is, and yet she's trying to tell Lois not to be looking into Morgan Edge, rather, cover the regular news that actually gets the money. And it's just one of those things that I thought was hilarious, because it's like, you hired Lois Lane, who is known for cracking these type of stories. Like, what did you expect you would get from her? And it's also really funny in a way, the fact that Lois is even working for a small newspaper like this, because she's considered to be the most famous journalist in the world. So she could have easily started her own blog, and I could guarantee you it would get 1,000 times more readers than working for this small newspaper. So it is kind of a weird decision for her on that part. But you could say that maybe it's just because she really believes more in the newspaper than she does the internet. And part of it could be, I guess I don't want to say charity, but it could be that she really wants to help out this small newspaper business, very similar to Jimmy Olsen at the during his last episode in Supergirl in a lot of ways. But during this meeting, they are introduced to someone. I can't remember her name. I believe her last name was Powell, but she basically tells them that they are on the right track of investigating Morgan Edge. She tells them that her son was someone that apparently had worked with Morgan Edge back in the day at one of his coal mining factories, and last thing that she had heard from her son was a message saying that the job wasn't what he expected, and he may not see her again. So this leads Lois to really believing that Morgan Edge is up to no good, and she starts looking more deeply into this. But then we get an exterior shot of the newspaper she's at, and we see that there is someone apparently spying on her. More than likely someone who clearly works for Morgan Edge and doesn't want any information or any negative information about him getting out to the public. We then again cut back to some of the high school parts of Superman and Lois, and again, more things about the show that I just am not the biggest fan of. So for one, we get Jordan Kent joining the football team, which I'm going to be nitpicking a little bit here, because again, I played football in high school, so I'm just going to nitpick at a few things that make absolutely no sense here. One is that he joins the football team, which you cannot do without a parent's permission, but he just shows up in a uniform and he's there ready to play some football. And the other thing that kind of makes no sense is the coach just throws him into the middle of a scrimmage. Now, like, doesn't even run drills with him, doesn't even try to make sure that he knows exactly like the formations that you're supposed to take. You never do that to someone, and you also rarely, if it's their first day of practice, you rarely let them even put pads on to begin with, because you got to first make sure they know the right formations, or else you send them out on the field and they end up standing up a little bit too straight, or their head goes down. They're going to get injured, and that's going to be on you as a coach, especially if you sent him out there without their parents' permission. So just a lot of this made absolutely no sense, but that's me nitpicking as someone who played football in high school, so I will shut the hell up and just talk about story-wise what just doesn't sit right about the scene. I definitely, after watching the scene, was not a fan of the coach himself, because, okay, for one, again, it's kind of something that I brought up in the previous episode, is that whether or not Jonathan Kent is a secondary quarterback, you still want him to improve. You want him to get better, and yet he's just standing there on the sideline the entire time doing absolutely nothing. And this isn't a football game, it's football practice, and yet the coach is just having him stand there doing absolutely nothing. And then he gets mad at Jonathan Kent when he sees how good Jordan is and makes him run 5 laps for keeping that a secret from him. Again, I'm probably just still nitpicking, even though I said I'd stop doing that, but it's just all stuff that kind of makes no sense to me. And once again, if this was an episode of Riverdale, I wouldn't mind this, but it's just so bizarre how out of place this high school writing is, and it almost feels like it's written by people that never went to high school before. We get some more discourse between Lois and her boss as she continues to, work on the story with Morgan Edge. But as the two of them are discussing this, Lois Lane's car blows up and in the middle of Smallville. And, clearly someone doesn't want Lois Lane looking into this. A scene that I also really liked comes between Clark and Lana Lang, where both of them kind of can relate with their kids. Definitely both of them having their own different type of mental health issues. I mean, Jordan with his anxiety, and then of course Sarah Cushing with her, suicidal behaviors, and both of them just not knowing how to get through to them. It's a really good scene, but of course it just really is there. It's just really there as an excuse for Clark to find out that Jordan has been playing football behind his back. We also do have one scene that I do kind of like from the football practice scenes. I believe it or not, there is actually a scene from the high school side of things that I actually did kind of enjoy. It's more of just the fact that we get this hint that Sean might not be a two-dimensional bully, because the moment that Jordan apologizes to him for, kissing Sarah, he does kind of give him the, okay, cool, like we're good now type of look. But it could have also been less out of respect and more out of, okay, if I say we're good, you're not going to tackle me like that again. Because right before that happened, it was during a tackle drill where Jordan, of course, knocked Sean completely across the field on his ass. We then, of course, have Clark, who finds out about Jordan playing football and is not happy. And he, tells Jordan that he can't do it, of course. And Jonathan at first kind of agrees with this, just because he feels like Jordan's only really doing this to show off and, no other reason. But then there's a scene, and I didn't get a photo of this, but there's a scene where Jonathan notices that Jordan has gotten a text from one of the other players on the team, and it's at that point he realizes that, whether or not Jordan actually likes football itself, the sport is clearly helping him when it comes to actually making friends. So he does feel like, it is something that he should be allowed to continuously do. So luckily Jonathan Kent is able to convince his dad to let him go back onto the team, which may or may not be a good decision. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. But then we get Lois, who continues to investigate, and she is told that essentially there is someone who is supposed to meet her at a motel room to give her more intel on Morgan Edge. But of course it turns out to be an ambush, as she is attacked by the same guy we see taking photos of her at the very beginning, the same guy who we can only assume was the one who blew up Lois Lane's car. And Lois Lane does put up a good fight, but this guy turns out to be a metahuman with enhanced super strength. So eventually she has to call in Superman, and we get a fantastic shot of Superman taking him down and knocking him through the other room. The fight is a really good fight, and at first the guy actually surprisingly has so much strength that he's actually able to overpower Superman for a brief moment. But of course, the moment he hears Lois's voice, that's enough for him to always get right back up on his feet and knock the guy down completely. One part of the show that I was not talking about before, but that's because I kind of wanted to save it for this point at the end, is that we do get a lot of Sarah Cushing and her mom Lana Lang just not really seeing eye to eye. And I know a lot of people probably weren't the biggest fans of this because it just kind of seems like more drama for the sake of drama, but honestly these were some of the scenes that I actually really enjoyed about the episode, because the family drama aspects, again, I feel like are the show's biggest strengths when it comes to focusing on family issues that a lot of families are dealing with. And so having a suicidal daughter is definitely a real serious topic, and I think the way they handled it in the show was actually very mature and well written. I especially kind of like, the explanation we get of why Sarah, almost decided to commit suicide the year prior to this episode. And it kind of comes down to just her looking at her life that she's currently living with her mother and her father, just, being in a marriage where neither of them are happy, and her kind of looking at her current life where she's with a boyfriend who, we still don't really know that sweet side that she says is apparently there, but she's clearly not the happiest with him, and so she worries that she might end up having the same life that her mother has, and it's just not a life she wants to live. And it's just that aspect of her feeling very trapped. And I like how her mom doesn't take offense to this, the idea of, yeah, I almost killed myself because I thought I was going to end up like you in my future. I like how she's very understanding through that. So I actually really did appreciate this moment between the two of them, and just their their whole chemistry, or I guess you could say I really liked the whole build up to the scene that we got throughout the entire episode. It to me did come off as authentic and not as drama for the sake of drama. We also have, this is something weird that I've noticed about watching the show on the CW app as opposed to watching it on the actual CW network. So I watched this episode twice. Once when it was airing, and then once again on the CW website, and I noticed that there are actually deleted scenes. So we get the scene where Clark actually joins the football team as the coach, which was not in the network version of the episode, which I thought was quite interesting. Just something I really wanted to point out. There was another scene earlier in the episode where it was Sarah just not wanting to eat dinner with her family, but rather just eat dinner in her room. Again, that was not in the network. That was not on the episode when it was airing on the CW network, but it is on the CW website. And I'm wondering if other superhero CW shows do this. Like, I know that with Stargirl, it was kind of like that, but it was more like on the DC Universe side of things. You would get longer extended scenes compared to when it was airing on the CW. But I'm not sure if other CW shows do this as well. So that's something I'd actually be interested in finding out. Lastly, this episode does kind of wrap up with Clark, again, like I mentioned before, allowing Jordan Kent to continue playing football, but the catch is that he, of course, has to be there to watch him as the coach to make sure he doesn't do anything crazy and he doesn't overuse his powers or get anyone injured. So overall, guys, not my favorite episode. One of the biggest problems I had with it was kind of not only the high school aspect of things, which I kind of went over how just overly cliche and two-dimensional that whole thing feels to me, but also with Jordan Kent. I feel like that's kind of one of the weird things they did with this episode, where it almost feels like we missed an entire episode prior, because last we saw the only thing Jordan Kent has been able to do with his powers was the heat vision. He had no super strength, no super speed, nothing like that at all. Even in the next episode, it's implied that the heat vision that he had was a fluke and that it would probably never happen again. But now we see him on the football team and he's kicking major ass at football. Like, he's just naturally skilled in football, and even though he doesn't have Superman style strength, it's clear he's clearly miles above average, especially for a kid who clearly never works out. So it was just one really weird thing for him to suddenly go from not being sure that he has powers to suddenly he apparently can control his powers perfectly when he's playing football. Like, he even tells his dad he knows exactly how much strength to use so he doesn't injure any of the other kids or anything like that. It just feels like we missed an entire episode. Like, the writers just suddenly decided that they didn't want to work on talking about how he's able to control his powers or anything like that. Like, that would just be too boring for them. that was one major thing that bothered me about it. Now, I do kind of have a theory about this episode just because of the way it was written, feeling a lot different and a lot like they were just kind of running in circles, is that I do know that Superman and Lois was originally only meant to have 13 episodes this season, but the CW extended them to 15 episodes. So it is possible that this was just kind of an episode written because they had to have an extra episode. So they just wanted to use it to really extend the season. That could be my only idea of why character progression seems to be going backwards rather than forwards. But regardless, again, it wasn't really a terrible episode. I just really wasn't a fan of any of the high school aspects of the episode, but I feel like whenever it was focusing on Lois doing her journalism, and then of course the family aspect as always, that's where I feel like the episode was at its strength. But guys, at the end of the day, these are just my A+ opinions. We here at A+ Opinions always want to know what you guys think, so definitely let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. Did you guys enjoy it more than I did? Did you guys think that the high school aspects weren't as bad as I'm saying they are? I definitely want to know your thoughts on it, so definitely let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more content, and if you guys are interested in donating to us, we now have a Patreon, which there will be a link for in the description below. But guys, above all, just remember to keep it A+.